Hey everyone, it's Julian, and you're never too old for bedtime stories. Tonight, we're going to be reading Chapter 11 of My Friend Flicka by Mary O'Hara. Blowflies rose, buzzing, as McLaughlin and the two boys stood looking down at all that was left of Rocket's foal. The hide was not yet dry. Particles of flesh still clung to teeth and tiny hooves. The hair of the tail and mane lay in a swirl over the skeleton. It was in one of the caves at the base of Castle Rock that Howard had come across it, and after a first triumphant cry, which called his father and kin to him, they had stood without speaking, and there was no sound except the angry humming of the flies that finally settled again on the carcass, shining, greenish, and busy. "It was black," said Ken, stirring with his foot the little tail that swirled over the bones. Death, now. This might have been his colt. Gelding and death. What else? "That's why Rocket wouldn't leave, isn't it, Dad?" said Howard.
"Guess so, son."
"Didn't she know it was dead?"
"She knew and she didn't know. Mares are funny about death. A mare won't hang around a dead foal or pay any attention to it. I've often thought they really don't recognize it or understand it at all, but when they get far away from it, then they remember and begin to hunt and whinny for it."
McLaughlin squatted down and began to examine the carcass. The spinal cord was severed in two places at the base of the neck. It had not been entirely eaten. The hide was intact on the haunches, the head part crushed, parts of the bones of the legs scattered some distance around. "Do you think it was a mountain lion killed it?" asked Ken.
"I think so. A wolf would have picked it cleaner. It didn't die itself, that's for sure, or it wouldn't have been in this cave. Something dragged it in here. Plenty of game has been dragged in here to be eaten."
The place was a charnel house of bones, as were all the caverns under Castle Rock.
"Take a look around, boys. We'll see if we can figure out what killed it and how it happened. The ground here in the cave is too hard to show any prints."
Ken was glad to feel the air on his face as he emerged from the cave and to get away from the smell and the sound of the blowflies. The day seemed to have changed, and between the high bank of light gray cloud and the earth was a scud of tattered dark clouds, racing from one mountain top to another.
"Gonna rain," said McLaughlin.
Howard gave a shout. "Here's blood, Dad!" He pointed to a long red smear on a flat rock, some distance from the cave. McLaughlin grunted.
"Dragged it across."
The line from the rock and cave led down to the stream. On the strip of sandy beach, where the stream had eaten under the bank, they found 4 clear, round prints.
"There it is," said McLaughlin. "Mountain lion, really. Though they call them wildcats around here. Look at the size of him."
The prints were as big around as flapjacks. Close by was the much trampled watering place of the horses, and here too, amongst the hoof prints, they found more of the prints of the lion. Howard said excitedly, "Biddy killed it when the horses came here for water. Jumped from the bank right on it." McLaughlin lit his pipe in a leisurely way, then shook his head.
"Wrong."
"Why?"
"Use your wits. A foal of that age, perhaps a week old, doesn't drink water."
"Well then, when Rocket came down to drink?"
"Rocket's a wildcat herself, and if it had jumped her foal when she was close by, she'd have attacked it. The cat would have been on the ground. She'd have cut it to pieces. What puzzles me is, where was Banner? If he'd seen the cat first, or smelled it, there'd have been a dead cat, not a dead colt. Banner must have been up at the other end of the meadow, Rocket off alone down here with the foal, and the cat was too quick for her. Killed it."
They reconstructed the scene. Rocket grazing, the colt separated from her, perhaps lying on the grass asleep, the sudden attack, the colt's scream, and Rocket rushing to the rescue when it was too late, the cat's escape, the mare sniffing, hanging over the dead foal, then in bewilderment wandering away to hunt elsewhere. "And then," said Howard, "when Rocket had gone away, the cat came back and dragged it away to the cave to eat it."
"And I guess that's the end of the mystery," said McLaughlin.
"But it's not the end of the mountain lion," said Ken. "Where is it, Dad?" McLaughlin took out a little steel measuring tape he always carried and measured the space between the prints of the 4 feet and hind feet.
5 feet 3,
he said, putting the tape away.
"A big fellow."
Both boys eyed their father, ready to take their cue from him. He seemed serious, but not worried.
"That's what I'd like to know, Ken,"
he said, standing thoughtfully, puffing on his pipe and looking around. Over at Dale's fence line, off at Castle Rock, and closer by through the aspen trees.
"I'm glad I've got the brood male bunch out of this meadow."
"Will the wildcat get others, Dad?"
"There's nothing here for him now to get. Everything's out of the range, on the range or up by the house. If the cat gets game enough here, he'll stay here. Let's hope he will."
"What do they eat?"
"Everything that's alive, even mice and gophers. They like a fresh kill, but they'll kill anything that moves. For fun if it's not for hunger."
"Can they get the horses and colts when they're on the range?"
"Not so easy when there's no cover. They hide and sneak up. Their only chance would be a surprise. If a horse saw them or smelled them first, it could get away, because a cat's got no speed. Legs are too short. Now and then, if there's one horse off alone, a wildcat will attack it. They leap from the ground. Then, land on its neck, bite the spine through. It's a quick kill."
Suddenly, there was an ear-splitting crash of thunder, and the rain poured down as if the explosion had burst a reservoir. The big, round footprints of the wildcat melted and ran off at a slide of water. As McLaughlin and the boys raced for the Studebaker, standing tilted on the hillside, Ken wondered if the cat was lurking somewhere near. He cast a glance backward at Castle Rock. On those high battlements and ledges were no end of hiding places. The cat might be crouching there, watching all they did. They got into the car and started off. Castle Rock was a sinister and fascinating place. Ken and Howard had explored it from top to bottom many times, crawling through the underground passages, counting and studying the bones and skeletons in the caves, climbing up outside, all over the high parapets and ledges, and still could not feel that they knew all of its secrets. On one of its ledges there trembled a huge boulder, as big as a locomotive, as smooth as a pebble. They had strained and heaved at it, convinced that a strong enough push would send it crashing off the ledge and caroming down. One morning, soon after dawn, Ken, standing on top of the great rock, had seen 5 coyotes organize themselves into a relay race and run down a rabbit in the meadow. They had stationed themselves at 5 points in a big circle, and had functioned in perfect teamwork, one coyote taking up the chase where the other dropped it, until the rabbit was exhausted and had begun to bleat and squeal, making little futile dashes in this direction and that. Then the pack of coyotes had flung themselves on it like football players in a scrimmage. There was a moment's fierce nosing, biting, shoving. Then the coyotes had come out of it and trotted off, and there were only a few bare white bones left on the meadow grass. McLaughlin drove the Studebaker across the creek to the southern side of the ranch, and went back over the hills which led down to Deer Creek and into the stable pasture, thinking to find Rocket and drive her out of the pasture without leaving the car. Howard said, "The way she goes through fences or jumps them, even if we do get her out to the pasture, she can come back in, can't she?"
"She can, and she does. That's the hell of having such a horse on the place."
"Then why do we do it?"
"It may hold her. Sometimes she minds the fences, sometimes she doesn't. Just as she fancies. The thing is to get her up with the brood mares. Banner'll keep her there. He's the only one can manage her."
It was still raining hard, and as they cruised about through the woods, up and down the little trails through the steppes, the boy could see that their father was losing his patience. The rain streamed down the windows of the car. Lightning split the skies, and thunder came in peal after peal. Rocket was nowhere in the stable pasture. They mounted the horses at last. Nell and Gus and Tim joined the hunt, and, protected from the driving rain by oilskins, they all scoured the woods and steppes for an hour, but there was no sign of the mare, not even the usual clue she left behind, a broken fence.
For once, she's gone over the fence and not through it, said McLaughlin bitterly. I'd like to know which way.
He sent Tim and Gus to do the milking and their evening chores, Nell and the boys to the house to get dry clothes on, and he himself rode out to the saddleback. If Rocket had joined the broodmare bunch on her own accord, there was nothing more to worry about, and if not, she must be found. The rain had stopped. The wind was sweeping all the clouds away, and a perfect rainbow spanned the sky, framing the hill. Color had come back to the ranch, the strong electric blue of the sky that in contrast made the roofs so red and the range so green and the pines so black. McLaughlin, mounted on his big, nervous, blood bay mare, Taggart, galloped up the saddleback into the strange light that blazed down from the rainbow. He had no idea where the mares were. They might be close at hand, hidden in one of the depressions of the rolling land, which were invisible to the eye at a little distance, or miles away. Suddenly, he was amongst them. They were quiet, watching him. They had known someone was coming, one rider, Rob McLaughlin. Banner was waiting for him and came forward immediately to meet him. Taggart pricked up her ears. Rob spoke to Banner and sat quiet, looking about, counting the mares, searching for Rocket, while Banner and Taggart had a small interchange of civilities tinged with flirtatiousness, Banner answering impertinent questions, Taggart telling him to keep his distance. A second rainbow shone out, almost as strongly colored as the first, and the space between the two filled with a bright brown color. Then came the hint of a third rainbow. Rocket was not there. McLaughlin turned his mare and rode out of the bunch. Banner galloped behind him for a mile, then circled away and returned to his responsibilities. When he had unsaddled, Rob gave orders to everybody to look for Rocket until she was found. The daily rides of Nell and the boys were to be directed to that, and Gus and Tim were to keep a lookout, wherever they happened to be working. Rocket must be bred immediately, if possible on the 9th day after she had dropped her foal, so that she would foal early the next season. A colt born late in the summer had not strength or growth enough to meet the early winter storms.
And after that, said Rob, I'll get that piece of rope off her neck.
He seemed to have lost his annoyance now that the day's work was done. He stamped about the kitchen, sniffing at the smell of fresh bread that filled it. But Nell, glancing at him, saw that his face had the implacableness that she dreaded. She got the bread knife and cut off the warm, crusty end of the loaf, smeared it thick with fresh sweet butter, and handed it to him, smiling at the size of the bite that went into his mouth. But she was thinking of that bit of rope, what it was going to cost, measured in time and violence and fury, to get it off. Lying beside Rob in the big walnut double bed that night, Nell had almost dropped off to sleep when she heard his voice.
Nell?
Yes, dear.
This wildcat business, and the boys. What do you think?
Her back was to him, but she could hear by his voice that he was wide awake and uneasy. He was up on one elbow. I know. I was thinking too. It scared me to death. After a silence,
To tell them to be on the lookout. To get heavier guns for them. The 22s would be of no good.
She finished for him. It would just spoil the whole summer, wouldn't it?
They'd have to take their guns wherever they went out.
Yes.
And even so,
that's it. Silence again for a few moments.
There's probably hardly a chance of danger. Only a chance in 100.
Do they attack people, Rob?
Attack anything if they want to. They're incalculable. Cats, you know.
Can they really kill?
They can kill anything they can get the drop on. Horse, cow, man, anything.
But only when they're hungry, I suppose. And there's so much small game here, and the horses, too.
Horse flesh is their favorite meat. No, I think I'll say nothing to them. I hate to put the fear into them.
They're mostly on horseback anyway, Rob.
Yes.
Nell lay thinking it over. It did not seem to her as an immediate danger, just one more of the hazards of mountain life. There was not a day that they were not in danger from something. Oh God, watch over my boys, my 3 boys.
Nell?
Rob's voice was lower, and he moved closer, leaning over her.
There's you, too.
Me?
You go out, up on the stable pasture to read and walk, all afternoon alone?
Yes.
And fishing, hours off alone. In Deer Creek, you walk along the stream there. There's trees overhead.
Yes.
Nell, I can't let you.
Oh, Rob, I can't stay in. I have to go out. I have to feel free.
Not under the trees, Nell.
They jump from trees, don't they?
Yes.
Damn this thing. What a nuisance.
Promise me, Nell.
She reached a hand back and patted him. I don't want you to be worried, dear. You have enough on your mind. But I'm really not a bit afraid.
I know, but that's no help. Chances are, sooner or later, one of us will get a shot at it. It comes up this end of the ranch. But meanwhile, don't go fishing in Deer Creek. Fish in the meadows where the stream runs in the open, and there are no trees.
All right, dear.
Promise?
I promise I won't fish in Deer Creek. She laughed and closed her eyes again. Always at night, her fatigue was a positive, pressing thing. She could feel it all the way through her, a heavy, aching, sweet. And yielding to it was like sinking into a sucking depth. Her thoughts began to scatter into grotesque formations like pieces of broken glass. She felt Rob's cheek on her hair. He was kissing her softly, all over her cheek and temple and down to the corner of her mouth. He thinks I'm asleep, she thought, and breathed more evenly and deeply, her eyes closed. So dead tired. The deep place drawing her down into unconsciousness. Rob getting her all into his arms and the curve of his body. Something moving in the thick foliage of the trees over Deer Creek. A branch stirring gently. Shadows. Wind rushing through with a sound. We'll read another chapter tomorrow night. Good night.